I've heard people go as far as to say there should be a hard cap on how many phase one and phase twos a company can win as a way to just prevent cyber mills as like a concept. Welcome to This Is Fine, the podcast where we dive into the gritty and usually not fun details of tech and government. This week we have Harold Smith, CEO of Monkton, an accidental SBIR expert, joining us today. With strong experience and expertise bringing innovation in acquisition and technology, Monkton was awarded a Phase 1 SBIR and Phase 3 for the Matter IDIQ for mobile apps to the tactical edge by U.S. Space Force. Today we'll be exploring the intricate workings of the SBIR program, innovation and procurement, and gather insights from Harold's experience. Welcome, Harold. Thanks for being with us this week.
Thank you for inviting us.
So I guess just to kick off for the unindoctrinated, what is the SBIR program? We touched on it last time we were together. It was a great conversation. That's why we really wanted to have you back to really do a deep dive here. If you could describe the SBIR program as a whole and its significance to government acquisition and government modernization.
Yeah, so SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research, they are research and development projects that the government, a lot of the times the DoD, but a lot of other agencies participate in the SBIR program, can publish topics to industry saying, hey, we're looking into this, we would like to procure this interesting technology. It could be an open topic. Air Force is very famous for, hey, throw something at the wall and see if it sticks. And it allows a company that might be pre-revenue, they could be building a product, that kind of thing, to say to the government, hey, we have this crazy idea of something that could really benefit you, but also benefit commercial industry. Or maybe they already have a commercial product and they're looking for that dual use fit, which is what they call it, of can I sell to government and commercial? And that Phase 1 SBIR allows the government to invest, say a sum of $50,000 into working on a prototype, working out potential customers within the government. It can be a variety of things. It really just depends on what you're going to partner with the government on to deliver. You can go to a Phase 2 SBIR after that, which is sort of the next stepping stone. Or you could jump direct to a Phase 3 SBIR from a Phase 1 or a Phase 2. It just really depends on the customer demand. And that really focuses on how do we operationalize this within the government. More procurement, easier procurement through pre-competed means, that kind of stuff. So a lot of the benefits of the SBIR program are, it might be a little bit of money to start, but it allows you to, one, get a government customer if that's what you're looking for, two, get a foothold in the door, but three, it really gives you an advantage to procurement of it's a pre-competed contract vehicle that really allows the government, if you can find the right advocate, to quickly act and put task orders on that either IDIQ or other contract vehicle you might have that's a Phase 3 SBIR.
So that's interesting because, well, first off, I want to dive into the notion of pre-competed contract vehicle and what that means for customers. But I guess my broader question, and I'll zoom to that, is so the government's in a lot of ways, it sounds like, paying SBIR awardees to create net new products and IP, other than getting IP for things that maybe the free market didn't bring them initially, which is, I think, the more obvious advantage to them. What's in it for the government from your perspective? Like in your experience and with successful implementations using the SBIR model, what would you say from your vantage point is like to the government? Like what makes it beneficial to the government?
So from our experience, it has been, if you've done government contracting, maybe if you're lucky, it's a 12-month cycle from meeting a customer to getting something done. I think, traditionally it's probably 18 to 24 months of that initial contract to maybe an RFP to maybe you win something. Like, it's just a very drawn out process. What this has enabled us to do is, we can work independently, we can work with partners. It doesn't matter who. It allows the government to rapidly acquire edge-based computing technologies from us, and it's a gamut of services, but it allows them to, within a week, they can come to us, say, hey, here's a mission, we need to solve this problem. We know what you guys do, we know what we can deliver, and what we can bring to the table as a government. And it allows us to work with them to deliver that capability. If you've ever done an OTA before, the way the phase 3 works for us has been it allows a lot of collaboration together with the customer. So it's not an RFP popping over the fence of, hey, we the government think this is what you need. It allows real collaboration between the government and partners with the government to say, hey, what you think you need might not be completely relevant. Like, here's a slight detour of this is probably the better fit for you that's going to get you where you want to be. And I think we all know telling customers, like, your ideas are good, but that's maybe not what you want to do isn't always the easiest. But this path has really enabled our customers to be successful because, one, they can work with us and our partner subject matter expertise, but in reality, it really enables more rapid acquisition, pre-competed, so that it's one easier for the warfighter acquisitions folks, but more importantly, it gets them to a decision point a lot faster. And for smaller companies, as you know, getting to a yes can be really hard, but if you can get to that a lot faster, it allows you to really help your government customer be successful. And that's really the value we found is it allows us to be successful, but also more importantly, our customer get to where they need to be.
So it sounds like it's kind of a combination of it being both unique in the offerings that are on there and speed, obviously being a colloquial thing appreciated by the government, not necessarily by government contracts officers, but definitely by government end users.
Yes.
Speaking of contracts officers, I'm curious what familiarity, I mean, because you mentioned OTs, and OTs have had this interesting oscillation in popularity, I would say. It's almost like there were early adopters that pressed the OT button for everything. Some of them were wildly successful and they're very happy with it. And they've moved to traditional contracts and they would say, look at the success of this OT lifecycle. Others were just trying to do traditional contracting faster, which is very much not what OTs are supposed to be, but frequently ends up being that way more often than one would think. How would you contrast the OT and SBIR Phase 3 from a programmatic standpoint?
I probably can't get into the nitty gritty details because that's contracting isn't my area of expertise. But our experience, we've done the OTAs before. Our first big win in the Air Force was under an OTA, and we got caught up in the end of when Oracle sued RainCloud and all that stuff happened with the DIU win, which sort of threw OTAs in a tizzy. They wanted us to accept new terms and all this crazy stuff after our contract had been awarded, and we're like, no, that's okay. With the SBIR, for us, it's that the speed of acquisition really helps. The ability to collaborate with the customer, like those have been probably the hallmark wins out of all this. And just learning, like one of our biggest things, we've just learned so much over the last few years, being able to collaborate with customers of, what are their true pain points? Like what are the things bothering them? And I see with Gen AI and cloud and all this stuff being, the main talking points that everybody's pushing. I got asked last week, what are your customers asking for with Gen AI? And my customers don't care. They're looking for quality of life improvements. They don't want to log into 6 different systems to do one task. Like they just need that single pane of glass. And I think a lot of technologists are looking to sell and push the latest and greatest thing, but that isn't always what our customers need. And I think that urgency of getting the acquisition path out of the way enables us personally to focus more on here's what we can help you solve today, so you can start to buy down some tech debt and really start to look at other problems you want to solve.
So that's interesting because I would say that in my experience, which I don't think differs necessarily, but I would have maybe thought of it differently. But we've done a lot more traditional contracting than we've done OTs on the hunter side. And one of the biggest frustrations in delivery for me is usually, well, we gave you the thing that you asked for. We've asked you a bunch of times throughout performance if you want to change the thing. And we're not like asking for a contract mod or more money or really anything. You're typically these days funding agile teams. So like you're funding a level of effort versus an outcome, even though it's fixed price contracting, and that's already interesting conceptually. But people are so what's the right word? Mystified by the acquisition process and changes that everyone's kind of afraid to say no, this is what we need to do now, and we have evolved. And when you get contracts officers involved, again, and I don't want to vilify contracts officers in this conversation because their job is hard and there's a lot of good, there's as many good ones as there are difficult ones out there. So it's an unfair thing to paint with one brush. But I've found that it's really difficult to get people to admit that they need to make this change and kind of give you the air cover you need to change timelines, change deliverables, change what's in traditional contracting. Would you say because it's pre-competed and it's similar to that OT where you have that down select and you're able to kind of collaborate, that you find either is it that there's less change in execution because you got to collaborate up front, or would you say because they're used to collaborating since before award, collaboration is now the norm?
Ooh, that's a good one. I mean, I guess, start on the contract officer thing. Like the biggest hurdle we've faced in all of this is just the lack of education out there on SBIRs, Phase 3 SBIRs, IDIQs. There's a big lack of knowledge within the acquisition community on what these can do. And it's not saying that acquisition experts aren't doing things wrong. It's just their ability to understand and get this information might be hindered in some ways. There are really good resources out there that small business or the DoD cyber office has put out there, but we've run into situations where people are like, "This seems very illegal." And like, no, 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 it's clearly defined in the FAR. I can point that out if you really need. But that, to be honest, has probably been our biggest hang up, and all this is trying to get through acquisition hurdles. When we are lucky enough to find a customer that knows what they want to do or has collaborated with us on what they want to do, contracting goes through. I guess to your question, we only do things that are fixed term price, just because it's easier, having to go through all the audit stuff with GSA for GSA pricing, like it's complexity. So, it obviously adds a little bit of risk if you're doing things fixed firm price. Like you need to know what you're getting out of the box. Planning for us has helped a lot. Finding customers that understand that, hey, this is going to be a journey. Like you're not going to get 100% of the things you need up front. I think it's easier when people don't die if the software doesn't work. I think that's probably helps. But, I still think those mission elements are there. And what we really been pushing is user-centered design. I know these are talking points, but that most companies talk about, that user-centered design. Like, how do you improve the quality of life of that warfighter that's doing recruiting, maintaining an aircraft? Doesn't matter what it is, but how do you make their job easier? Because we all, I know we all have our own businesses here, and you get to sort of pick and choose the software you want, but some of it still sucks. And, but all the software they use is terrible inside the government that I've been shown. So, how can we collectively help them move to where we can help with recruiting, retention by giving people the technology that they would use internally, that they would use externally? Like I saw some graphic of, new enlistee on his phone is watching all the stuff going into work, and then it like turned into a 1950s TV, like black and white when he got into work. And sadly, that's what a lot of our federal employees, DoD employees are seeing when they go in, is just that old legacy process.
So I guess one of the first things that I would think about is once you, so obviously got to find the right customer, got to have someone that's willing to work through an innovative process that doesn't look like the standard service acquisition package that they're used to letting. There have been criticisms of the SBIR program. The term SBIR mill gets thrown around quite a lot. And I'm curious because there's the open recs for SBIRs, and then there's more of the, I'll call them shaped recs, right? Where you're not just kind
Things
of
that aren't wired, but they are.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, exactly. And so I'm curious in what ways you think SBIR funding as a whole has really supported innovation and advancement of technology, or is it just a better mousetrap for contracting where again it's unique and it needs to be fast? So I'm saying that, and I guess just to give you the why, I guess I'm trying to distill for listeners. Is it that we need, if we had to, if they were to, if we have a congressman listening that wants to improve the SBIR program, is it around inviting more people to do acquisitions faster with good partners? or is it around widening the aperture on whatever the du jour is of technology, be it AI, be it the mobility stuff that Matter looks at? Like, what would you say is the best way to improve it based on what's perfect today?
Like I didn't really agree with how the government Congress really went about trying to reform it last. I guess it was last year, like with the deadline and all that looming and the reauthorization. But I definitely do think, Harold's opinion, the Cyber Mill thing really needs to be taken care of, because if you're a company just out there cranking out Cybers year after year and not doing what the intent of the Cyber program is, then you know you're really not following the spirit of the law. And I think that's important. I think that really needs to be drilled down into. Like, if you've been awarded, some of these companies have been awarded hundreds of Cybers over the years. I even think there's like ones that have won thousands. And
The pie chart of it, when you look at number of companies related to SBIR dollars, is like incredibly vexing
yeah,
from a are we really creating innovation here, especially with the volume of phase ones and phase twos, where it's like they're just not graduating to useful implementation notionally, but we've still managed to give however many millions of dollars to these small firms to like ideate and then do nothing.
yeah.
At least that's the perception that comes, and certainly the thesis of a lot of the anything that says Cybermill in a article post, like that's its thesis, right? That's what they're trying to say.
Honestly, there's a lot of external factors of why things don't go from phase 1 to 2 to 3. Like, it can be, we've been told you have the best, widget in the world, but here's gonna like we have no path for somebody to use this in the next 2 years, even though it's going to solve an immediate problem, like an immediate problem. So, how do we escape the valley of death? How do you get more companies from phase 1 to 2 to 3, or jump directly to phase 3? I know of a company out there. I'm good friends with the CEO, and they're up for a phase 3, but the government is denying them because one of the software factors is like, well, we can actually do this ourselves. So, like, why would we invest more money in this? And it's like, well, you've already invested all this money to get where you are today for basically a turnkey solution. Why are you going to reinvent the wheel when we don't need to? So there's that. It's even more complex because now you have internal, struggles of, hey, well, we can do this ourselves, or we can pay a contractor. I guess if I was to wave a magic wand, it would be, geez, easier ways to connect. I know AppWorks has tried some of this. Easier ways to connect if you're building something or have a capability, how you can get it out into more organizations that might want to be using it. I think that's a big one. But if you don't have a DoD CAC, you can't use the GAL to get access to email addresses of other folks. So there's a lot of artificial barriers to entry. Like, if you win a phase 1 or phase 2 Cyber, you still can't just reach out to whoever you want in the DoD. Like, a lot of these organizations would be like, oh, go find the commander that's running this program. And it's like, well, there's no white papers. Yeah. And, I think a lot of that knowledge isn't given to these companies that, they're brand new. They're trying to go something good for the government, to help out everybody, but they lack the institutional knowledge to be able to fight, the knife fights that you need of maybe some of these Cyber mills have. So, even from that competitive standpoint of, we all know larger companies can afford to protest contracts, all that stuff, where smaller ones, like a month protest is going to totally screw you because you don't have, tens of millions of dollars sitting in the bank where you can afford to do that. So I think that even applies to smaller companies, maybe that are bootstrapped, maybe have a little bit of VC or angel funding that are trying to figure out this path. And again, AppWorks has done some to make it easier, but still there's these big barriers to entry if you want to try to get in. So, maybe from my perspective, it would be, how do we make it easier? Maybe it's not really a cyber question of how do we make it easier to acquire software, hardware, whatever, that actually provides value to the warfighter, DOE, Department of State, whoever, and not make it so hard. If there's a really good capability out there, why do you have to go through all these hoops where it could be something the government acquires directly? So, maybe it is a larger conversation of acquisition reform, but I'm not an expert on that.
Yeah, well, I think even experts on that aren't really experts on that. And actually, to that end, because I do want to dig in on Matter and how that aligned and how that was successful. But I've heard, and I'm just curious your take, because it feels like maybe this is like when I hear this suggestion and I'm like, yeah. And then I'm like, wait, that sounds like the blunt instrument. Those aren't usually good. which is I've heard people go as far as to say there should be a hard cap on how many phase one and phase twos a company can win as a way to just prevent cyber mills as like a concept. Now, and like when you hear, and again, you see these pie charts and you see the thesis of cyber mills are bad, my immediate reaction is, yeah, get them. And then I'm like, wait, that doesn't feel very innovative. Like hard caps sound like inherently problematic. And I'm curious because you've made it to phase three and you're pushing work through a phase three. Do you need more phase one and phase twos to kind of grow your portfolio, or you feel like you've got a good phase three, it's well scoped, you can do lots of different innovation with it, and I'm just curious where that suggestion fits in your experience.
Yeah, so I guess it comes down to I think you hit it on with scope. When we get to the phase three, we were lucky enough we defined scope wide enough in our phase one. When it went to phase three, they were able to like take that and run with it, and which is why the scope of what we're doing is pretty large. But I feel a lot of people when they're submitting their phase ones, like they limit scope, they limit what they're doing, what they're delivering, that kind of thing. So they're actually putting themselves in a bounding box of what they can actually leverage if they get to the phase two, phase three. Once we had a phase three, like pure honesty, like I don't apply to RFIs, RFPs anymore. I don't even look at RFQs because why go out there and have to compete with 40 different organizations, 40 other companies when we can go in directly and have a conversation with somebody that's looking to do something immediately. So it changed the calculus for us. Like I definitely see, maybe I don't know what the number is, but maybe hey, you can only submit or land 5 a year, or whatever that case may be, because we all know there's a limited number of people to assess those SBIR contracts or SBIR submissions. So if a company's blasting out 100 at a time, that's 99 other people that could have a slot to be able to submit something if you could submit one a cycle. But I think to your point, it is going to limit competition or innovation, because now you have, I have 3 innovative things that I could submit. You can see the math. So I don't think there's a good answer, but I think we can all see that something part of it's broken. Like I was thinking of a good quote, but it's escaping me right now. Of like, I don't know how to define something vulgar, but I know it when I see it. The famous Supreme Court.
Yeah, I don't know what pornography is, but I know it when I see it. Yep.
I think that's sort of the same. It's like we all know what the cyber mill is, but how do you define it and mitigate that? It's the hard part, and I don't think any of us have a good answer for that right now.
Certainly not on our side. That's definitely a more attorney and policy question than those of us just trying to build cool stuff. But one thing that I also just to kind of bookend it is when I look at Matter and some of these very software technology kind of combination software hardware type of things, that's reasonably narrowly scoped, but wide enough that you can do a lot of different functional things with it. I've seen software factories get a phase three, and like that's inherently, it feels a little wrong to me. And I'm not going to name any names here because I think the companies that did it were frankly very innovative from an acquisition standpoint. So I'm not going to I'm not hating on that. But then you look at the other side, and it's like lighter polymer for planes. And it's like there's like incredibly, like when I say narrowly focused, it's like caulk for submarines that's also radiologically sound for nuclear reactors. And it's like such a narrow moat. And somehow this is all the SBIR program. So it feels like there could be some better subcategorization within SBIRs that might help shed a little bit of light, because a lot of the mills, to be fair, let's say that the mills aren't a problem. I'm not saying that they are, but let's take that position for a second. A lot of the mills are doing very similar chemistry type studies in their big chemical engineering firms, and they've Air Force has put out, to your point, they'll just throw a bunch of shit to see what sticks, and they'll take like 5 different approaches to making the F-22 refab for electronics and hardware casing and whatever, a new and innovative thing that they're going to test and partner with the manufacturers to do. And so, sure, give them 5, give them 10. They're doing chemical engineering. The barrier to entry on that is hard. Productizing new chemistry is incredibly expensive and, frankly, should be government subsidized, or we wouldn't have half the chemistry that we have that saves lives today without that type of willingness to innovate and throw away and iterate. But then you look on the software side, and it's kind of like, well, we're not inventing a new chemical compound here. We're doing a better thing. We're doing it a better way. And I certainly believe that that's very much innovation and research. But it almost feels like using the same program for both of these things is part of the issue. And that kind of gets back to the whole do we just need a better innovative track to get to companies like Monkton, that can, to allow you to eschew traditional RFP life cycles the way that SBIR has let you do, or do we need to overhaul what we mean by innovation as opposed to acquisition? So not looking for an answer specifically because that's just kind of amusing, but that's why that was one of my, whenever I read these articles and I start getting into a bit of a Google hole, and I'm looking through okay, this company won 20 of them. And I'm like, oh, but they're all building new chemical compounds. That would be if that was me going after a software thing, that would have just been one contract and I would have just won one. There would be no need for 20, but they have the detailed specs of the compound in the SBIR requirement. And it's just a very different thing to me. But anyway, so switching to matter, how would you say that matter really aligned with the Space Force's need for innovation when you were going through phase one?
So our phase one was actually with Air Force Special Operations Command. He's retired now, but Captain Tim Nolan was the one that we worked with. He was our technical point of contact. Well, we focused our project around edge computing with mobile devices, cloud technology, ICAM, identity solutions, how everything fits together. That was in late summer of 2019. And then everything happened in 2020. We had actually submitted for the phase 2 SBIR with AFWorks, and there was a continuing resolution that got mucked up at the end of 2019, and then COVID happened. So that sort of just blew apart any phase 2s that were happening. It was part of right time in the right place. That always plays some into this. We got connected through some of our friends to Northcom, who was running point on, hey, we need to move Mercy Comfort. We need to set up field hospitals in mid-March of 2020. And they were able to take our phase 1 SBIR and migrate that, or whatever the proper term is, to a phase 3, because the work we had done and the scope we had set fit directly into, hey, how do we rapidly deliver capabilities to the edge using cloud, using mobile identity services and all that good stuff. So we were able to move really fast. And in that time, April 1st, we were awarded Matter. We started work on the contract immediately, and we had a DISA audited IL4 ATO within a month. We were delivering the first capabilities within a month to those folks on the edge. So really what Matter boiled down to is the ability to rapidly procure solutions that matter. That
is that the origin of the name? Is that the origin of the name, solutions that matter?
When we started, this goes back probably 2016, 2017. We had been talking of mobility and all that, and it really boiled down to, what are you doing at your job? Does it matter? Does what you're doing matter? It's a security matter? Does confidentiality? It got around, is the work these people are doing every day does it matter? And that's really where we sort of got this name of Matter came from, of we want to help the work that matters. Obviously mobile something to the tactical edge, we had to reverse engineer the acronym, but
all the best acronyms start with the acronym first. They don't need to mean anything yet.
And then, we just started running, and, they started issuing the first task orders to help with COVID response. Since then, we've been doing work at DHS with CWMD, a few others, Air Force, Space Force, a couple of SOCOM elements. So we've been able to get into civilian as well as many of the elements within it can be used in any federal agency, but we've really had some good pickup there.
So I'm curious because your phase three was issued by Space Force, correct?
Yes.
So, but you said phase one was Air Force Special Operations
Yep.
Command. Was that is that a common path where a different person does your phase one or phase three, or is that more of a function of Space Force was just created and was transferring authorities? So, like, you kind of started in what would have been an Air Force office, but became Space Force later.
So and this is Harold's non-legal understanding of all of this. So anybody listening, please can talk to your lawyer because I'm probably wrong. From my understanding is with that phase one, any organization that can issue SBIRs could take that phase one and issue phase two, phase three. It just really depends on, and again, I could be totally wrong. So please check my facts, somebody. But that was sort of the path that I understood. And I have to assume that I wasn't involved with the negotiations and all that, but somewhere Space Force, AFWorks were sort of working together to make that happen.
Well, and like, look, Space Force came from Air Force. There's a lot of connective tissue there, and it's been as much as people kind of mocked it from a name perspective, and there was a lot of dissent around it as it came out. I mean, seen a lot of great innovation out of Space Force, a lot of innovation in acquisition. It's in Colorado, which is beautiful. So there's a lot of really great reasons to be there. So I definitely have been. I was a skeptic because it was like, do we need another, executive level thing? It just feels like we got rid of GIFCOM in the early 2000s. Like, we got rid of, like, that seemed like a step in the right direction to get rid of redundancy. Do we really need it? And there were many experts saying we didn't, but I've also seen what they've been able to do without the baggage of a 200-year history, and it's been pretty amazing. So it's like, do we call it Space Army and get rid of the Army? Like, is there a way to kind of get everybody to have these reinventions? Because it's, by and large, I think, been good for innovation and technology and for the warfighter, right? Space Force service members are some of the happiest that and again, personal selection bias, but definitely some of the happiest service members I've ever worked with. So I'm just just curious how that transition there, and I do believe I've seen that path happen multiple times where a different phase one sponsor transitions to a different phase three sponsor. That feels like the system working. But I will say, if anybody is a procurement lawyer, they should definitely fact check if that's like just a free for all, or there's like a more specific path to that I'm unaware of.
But it has to be on the up and up because somebody submitted an IG complaint right after we were awarded. And
so you actually had an IG audit that, like, kind of I mean, it's that is the SBIR phase threes are fraught with complaints.
Yep.
Both from, I feel like, a combination of people that don't understand them and sore losers. I feel like it's kind of the two, right? Because when you don't have a stake in it and you kind of get the legal FAR process behind it all, it actually feels like a really great tool. And this is said as a person that's made $0 from SBIR, applied to 0 SBIRs. I'm not a SBIR guy. I'm fascinated by them because I love working with the innovative vendors that have them. But I'm a traditional acquisition guy and a software acquisition guy. And if you're doing COT software, that's not really the SBIR path. At least traditional COT software is got its own FAR and its own justifications, and traditional high-end services are just about convincing the customer that you're the best, having good price intelligence, and writing a good proposal. And that's, doesn't always win by any means. You can look at the win record. It's not an always thing, but it's just something that I feel really comfortable with. But I've never, I don't know, like I said, it feels just like you either don't get it or you're really pissed that you didn't get it. Those are the two reasons people complain about SBIRs, from my, again, selection bias, not actually doing it myself. So changing slight gears on that, I'm curious what challenges you came across as you jumped from 1 to 3 that are not necessarily acquisition challenges, right? Because, I mean, certainly there's a lot of education and complexity there, but I'm curious what, if any, technical barriers were kind of something you needed to solve to get to phase 3, or was it purely an acquisitions and process thing that kind of had to matriculate?
I mean, for us, it was the luck of, I mean, it was a horrible time. Like, who wants to think back to early 2020, but it was just, the luck of...
But mobility was like super important for the success of everybody getting out of COVID. So, okay. So
Yeah,
yeah, timing. So timing. I mean,
yeah,
that
I
makes
mean,
sense.
the timing was 90% of this win. Like, we had obviously, like a lot of firms that have won phase threes or haven't won them. Like, we did a lot of hard work to get there. So,
I was curious what like you said, the barriers to getting there, and we've talked a lot about the acquisition ones. I was just curious if there were any more technical ones that for listeners or things to think about that are because a lot of deaf tech businesses are super into the
yeah,
cyber aspects and they're very excited about them and they're kind of where you were in 2019, right? Of
yeah,
like trying to find the right phase one sponsor and trying to show the uniqueness of their tech. And I'm just trying to paint a path forward here. And there's a lot of acquisition complexities, and I don't want to say doom and gloom because you're on the other side of it. It's a good thing, but there's a lot of there's certainly we've talked a lot about that. I'm curious if there were more technical barriers that you felt that kind of I don't want to say stopped because it obviously didn't. You were successful in
yeah.
getting a phase three and doing real through production delivery work under phase three, but was there anything that kind of made it harder to get the phase three from a technology perspective that would help other at a high level help people think about it? Like, is it a have a production thing that works and really phase two is better, or if you do a phase one you're trying to skip to three, have a production demo to show people that proves that phase three is really possible? Like, those are that's just in my mind. And again, not being a
Yeah.
cyber guy, so I'm kind of amping here, but like, what's the what were those types of challenges for you, and what could you teach other people about that?
I think just, maybe harping on back, like getting a hold of, other people within the government, like, it's just never easy if you lack the CAC PIV to, get to the address books, that kind of thing. Like, that was probably one of the bigger challenges. I mean, we were lucky that our customer was great. Like, you can't beat a good customer that wants to do well. And your customer can really set you up for success or not, in a lot of ways. So, that's always the luck of the draw. And, we really got lucky with Tim and he was a big help. And now that he's out, like, we chat all the time in these fun things. Um, yeah, that was probably one of the hardest one, like technical, I think with, obviously with NIST 800-171, you're supposed to be compliant, but with the CMMC stuff, like it's going to be interesting to see what the fallout is from that, of how that impacts companies. Like we've switched to the G Suite, I mean, Google Workspaces for everything with assured controls. I think that's probably for every or every company look to do business with the DoD where they might touch CUI. It's probably the best bang for the buck, compliance wise. I think it's $600 a user a year. GCC is a lot more than that. I'll let everybody know.
I know, I pay
Yeah.
it.
But we've been happy with it. Most people know how to use G Suite, and for us, it's been easy with collaboration because most of our customers are somehow using Google Suite or Google Workspaces in some capacity. So I think those kind of requirements that people don't really pay much attention to are important. An easy way is just not touch CUI, like refuse to touch CUI, and you don't really have to worry about that as much.
Well, and I will say, because I just to kind of tie that technical challenge to OTs versus SBIRs, because most OT consortia make you get your export control form, make you like very self-attest, like beyond the typical sign here, I self-attest that I did 800-171. They really do make you have to have your SPIRS score. They really push that on the OTs, but on SBIRs, it feels like they're trying really hard to avoid going down that path, except for some super specific SBIRs. So I'm wondering, do you think that's intentional, as like because there's this barrier for people, they just want to keep the innovation going in commercial entities that otherwise wouldn't need to be DFARS compliant?
So they do have to be DFARS compliant. All those requirements still exist.
Even in phase one.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those it depends kind of things. Just depending what you're
But it
doing.
was for you. It was definitely for you.
Not for so in our first contract it wasn't, but following on, we've steadily avoided touching CUI in our systems. Like we're still doing all the compliance stuff, but we live and breathe within our customer. Like we deploy in our customers' Amazon environments, so we're not touching any even test data that the government has. We don't touch. So I think for a lot of companies, it's how can you firewall off yourself from having access to information you don't need, because there's nothing worse than getting information you never need and having to protect it. So, piece of my advice would be take as little data as you can when you don't need it.
Yeah, and I'm on the other side where it's like we spent all this money on GCC High and all of our additional controls, and we try really hard to be compliant because we so frequently need to do development for customers on our corporate workstations because the dev environments for customers are typically garbage, right? And then I've had people say, "Well, you can't do that; it's against the rules." And I'm like, "No, it's very much in the contract. We can do it." And to your point, we don't want your data. We just want the code, which is, by the way, in an internet-facing GitLab anyway. So, like, why are you like freaking out about us doing a commit and build of completely unclassed code?
Yeah.
All the data staying in your environment. To your point, we try really hard not to take data on that we don't need. It seems like poor risk management, but like we've had people be like, no, 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 you need to do your development through a guacamole instance, and it's painful. It's painful for
So yeah,
people.
we'll pass on that one.
Yeah,
Thanks.
exactly. It's like, well, we've luckily had customers that understand when you put in real terms like this is how slow your development is going to go if you can't even let us use RDP or like some like actually
I
reasonably high throughput tool.
I had to use Guacamole for one project to manage some AWS stuff, and that was just managing like clicking through the AWS console. I couldn't imagine how horrible that would be.
Oh, running your IDE in guacamole, yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible. And we've actually had some customers because just to kind of because I gave Air Force a lot of kudos for innovation, but I'll say Cloud One really feels a little regressive in cloud to me, and
Mhm.
not to put anyone on blast for it, but it's like they it port 22 is a prohibited port in Cloud One as a general rule, and I'm kind of
Yeah.
like that screams of somebody seeing a lot of port knocking and port scanning and being like, make it go away. And so they just ban the port entirely. And now it's like, oh, we're using the secret 2202 and now we're safe. So it's just, and we do that because we're trying to avoid guacamole by using putty and passing
Yeah.
X windows through a bastion because they're, trying to force guacamole for certain control plane things, and it's just incredibly not viable. So it's interesting the technical challenges that data protection create. I very much believe in everybody finding their 171 controls, but kind of like the whole ban, more than X awards of SBIR, it feels like we've oscillated from we don't care where CUI goes in contractor environments to never let it happen ever, even if you're fully CMMC compliant and appraised. Because we don't want to be on, we don't want to be in the news of a CMMC problem. And
Well,
so
right.
it's interesting because I was thinking it would be more about your technology and matter as a barrier and not your corporate barriers for technology. But it's a really good, it's a really good note for people that are trying to get into the space, right? That it's not just your tech needs to be proven, your whole corporate environment needs to have strong compliance to be able to get to phase three for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know what variance there is in phase one, but that's an interesting. I would never have thought of that as a technical challenge, but it's a very good one.
Well, and I touch on for us it was I think the best thing besides that advice is build products that work seamlessly, that are easy to use. Like it's you're selling much more than just the technology; it's the experience and all that. So you really have. I don't think we would have gotten to phase three if we didn't hit a grand slam with our phase one. So that delivery aspect of it is you know I mean we do it for every customer, but you have to go above and beyond, and I think that's the real trick to getting. And I'm not saying people that haven't gotten phase two or phase threes haven't gone above and beyond, but you need to stick out there. What's the Japanese saying? The tallest nail gets the hammer first, or something like that. It's like you want to stand out and get attention. So however you can do that in a positive way.
Well, yeah, there's certainly lots of negative. I mean, DoD is famous for people finding ways to get negative, using negative attention as an interesting approach. I'm curious, and this is a good closing note because I think you actually already gave some of this. But what advice would you give to companies and listeners that are looking to use SBIR as a vehicle to bring their technology and innovation to the government sector? Like, what would be your like? This is your playbook, so to speak, of how to be successful there.
So I would say you don't have to have an SBIR or a phase three to actually do work under one. Like we have partnered with a good few companies, like a lot of smaller companies, some not a whole lot larger, but that alone has been a way for us to get in front of new customers with our technology, but they're always complementary technologies. Like, we're not just going in and selling a widget. It's, hey, here's how you press the easy button and your whole solution's there, that whole capability. So it's allowed us to do things like with some agencies. It's not our area of expertise, but we partner with people on crypto analysis for Bitcoin, altcoin stuff. Like, but we're able to tie in how we get that to the edge, how we use cloud computing. We've done work with others on similar kind of things where that technology isn't our subject matter expertise, but we can tie in how does the edge, snowball devices, that kind of thing play into it. So just because you don't have the phase 3 doesn't mean that you can't work with companies that might have one and are looking to deliver those kind of capabilities. So, that the lack of access doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to get there. It just means that you might need to make friends. And, even on that, I talk to other companies, other founders that maybe they're trying to get a phase 1, maybe they're trying to get to phase 2 or phase 3. I don't have all the best advice since, I consider a lot of it luck, but it goes back to the hard work, who you can talk with, who can give you suggestions of who to work with. And then, your delivery is obviously the most important. But, I think even just doing this knowledge sharing, I think these kind of stories are very important for us to get out because, they're all knife fights when we're combating the larger primes that are out there that can do, play the game differently than we can. So I think it's incumbent upon smaller companies, smalls, to work together to share knowledge, share how we can all help. Because everybody I've met that owns a small company is out there trying to do better. I don't think any of us think this is the joke is how do you, it's not necessarily for defense contracting, but how do you make a small fortune in defense contracting? You start with a large one. And I feel like that's sort of the same here. It's you're going to do well for yourself, but you're not going to be let's be honest, you're not going to be the next Lockheed. But I think enough of the small companies can work together to solve really big problems that really matter to them. For me, I've reached out to USDA. I grew up on a dairy farm. My family's still full of farmers. With the bird flu, in fact, H5N1 infecting cattle and disrupting the dairy industry, it's like, what can we do to help with that problem? Like, that's the kind of fun stuff that Matter enables us to do. I say fun in a not very fun way, but it enables us to rapidly help solve problems that are really hard. And I think there are a lot of companies like you guys out there that really want to solve hard problems, because it's going to improve people's lives. And I think, to me, that's been the really driving factor behind all this is how can we help the lives of service members of our government better so they can help citizens, they can protect us and get to where we need to be. Like, to me, the money will follow, that's a different conversation, but how can we get those technologies in the hands of people that need them? It, to me, has always been, paramount.
Thank you, Harold, for coming this week. Really appreciate your time. Always enjoy the conversation. We're definitely going to have you back again. Would love to do a broader view of SBIRs. We should definitely spend some time looking at other companies that kind of look in this space, as well as OT awardees, large and small. I think it'd be great to talk about non-traditional contracting at a broader table. So I think that would be a really great follow-up and a really great thing that we can do together. I really appreciate you coming.
No, thank you. And I even throw out there, maybe there's a GS-15 or SES contracting officer we can get on here as well, just to talk through.
It would be great to hear that perspective. I always, it's funny because some offices are like all for it, and then other places are like, no, legal, PR, we don't even know where to start. It's not that they don't want to do it. It's like they're very afraid of the process of doing it. But I agree. I think there's a lot of places there's a lot of ones that would love to be certainly defend when we make fun of contracts officers. I think they need to be here to tell their side of it. But also, I think that there's a lot that we don't know because we're just on our side trying to red team the acquisition process to get through. And so we need the intended approach from their side as well, I think.
I know we jab at contracting officers too, but I mean, if I was in their shoes, I wouldn't trust contractors either. So
for sure. One of I again won't name names, but we won a big contract at a DoD agency, and it was a big seminal win for us. Traditional contract was actually a follow-on to an OTA, but it wasn't our OTA. We managed to prove we could operationalize the technology technology better than the incumbent. And I really just wanted to take the government lead out for a cup of coffee and thank him, right? Just like to say, he can pay for it. I just wanted to thank him. He's like, look, you got a great company. You clearly had the right decision for us to be here. You're my contractor. I'm your customer. We can't be friends. And I was just like, noted. I respected it. So I totally I understand what you're saying. I didn't take any umbrage in that moment. I was like, all right, you're defining clear boundaries here. Can I appreciate that? And he's been a wonderful collaborator and in any number of ways, a big defender of calling balls and strikes when you're dealing in really complicated environments. So I think it almost like you have to have a healthy distrust of those people in order to be credible in calling balls and strikes for the other side. So I definitely, you're right about that is the bottom line. You're very right about that. My experience is insane.
No, well, thanks for having us on again. I really appreciate it. And yeah, again, it's a hard world, and contracting officers are fighting against misinformation everywhere, and how do they deal with that? And our experience with the Space Force KOs, like you mentioned them before, they're fantastic, and we can't ask for better partners.
Yeah, like I said, definitely some of the best service members I've ever worked with in the Space Force. So definitely agree there. Thank you again. Thanks. Tune over next time for This Is Fine. Thanks, everybody.